Hello everyone, welcome to Liam's Lifetime. I'm your host Liam, aka Himvar, and today I have another weekly update for you. This is Liam's Leapings number 60 for the 21st of October 2023. Now, first off, we're approaching the 23rd, which for those unaware is the Day of Might, which is the day to celebrate sword and sorcery. I've made videos for it the last 2 years, 2021 being my first year on this channel, but also the first year the Day of Might was celebrated. And also, I don't have any plans for it. The last year, I did a live stream along with my just video talking about it quickly. That was a fun live stream, but I haven't made any plans. I might cobble something together, do a live stream or something. I don't know if it'd be by myself or with other people. If anyone wants to get together and talk sword and sorcery, probably sometime in like Monday evening, let me know. I just wanted to kind of last year I used it to involve like sword and sorcery members of the community, and not just here on like BookTube, right? So I had Raph from Raph Blue Tax, who is one of the few booktubers who does talk about sword and sorcery. Um, but I also had Oliver Brackenbury, who is editor in chief of New Edge Sword and Sorcery, and I also had Nat Webb, who is one of the editors as well for New Edge Sword and Sorcery. So that's just kind of what I'm thinking about right now. Like I kind of maybe I'll make a little post in the Whetstone Discord server and be like, who wants to talk sword and sorcery on Monday? And I didn't give any notice, but maybe I should just reach out to people in particular because I might get like a weird response if I do that. Maybe I don't know. I reached out last year to the people privately, but this week I did read 4 books. The first 2 I read were sci-fi, and then the third one was sword and sorcery, fantasy, and then the fourth one was also sci-fi. So I'm continuing the night in the Lonesome October, which I actually am behind a couple days. Maybe I'll listen to that after I record this. But I'm just behind by a couple days, and it's getting the chapters are getting longer. They were pretty short for a while there, and then they got really short for a couple days, and then they've gotten longer now. So, but and I think I finished up the last stories in section 1 of the Big Book of Cyberpunk. I believe no, I think I finished them up before my last weekly update, but I did discuss section 1 with Tim. And that video came out Wednesday. If anyone's interested in that, it's over 2 hours long. But we go over all the short stories. I think maybe you'd be interested in it. I did start the next section, but I haven't made a date with Tim yet to when we're going to talk about that next section. I've only read the first 2 stories as well, so I've read very little of it this week. And then I'm also still reading The Wanderer by Fritz Leiber. There was several days there where I read practically nothing in this book, like 1 page, one day, 1 page the next day, 10 pages maybe the next day. So I'm finally about halfway through. I think last week I was like 70, 80 pages in. Now I'm like 150 or 160. I'm really enjoying it. I was busy watching Halo this last week in Halo World Championship, and my team got second, which is very disappointing for me, but I was not reading much. And then after that, I've just been kind of busy. I had like 3 job interviews last weekend. And then which is the most I've ever had in a week, right? Like I've been applying for a ton of jobs, but I've had, a handful of interviews, but I had 3 interviews last week, and then I didn't get a job for any of them, which, was kind of disheartening. It seems like I did get hired for a temporary job, like a seasonal, that would last through December probably. And it pays decently well. It's not really work I want to be doing, but it's work, which is better than nothing because I'm not making much money. I also did have a job that I got here through YouTube, that it's like kind of a part-time temporary type of thing as well, if that makes sense. So and that is the type of job I do want to be doing. That's enjoyable. Involves research and writing, but I'm glad that I have these different connections that have helped out with that. Starting my channel actually is what really got all of those going. But and I did start New Edge Sword and Sorcery issue 2. I was hoping to have that review out by Tuesday, and then I was thinking, the day of might is Monday. Maybe I'll move my Monday review to Tuesday, and then these extra reviews on Tuesday put into Monday because they're Sword and Sorcery anyways. But it's looking like I probably won't have that ready by Monday or Tuesday. I'm pretty far behind. I'll probably be spending my day of might reading it instead. And so, yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm pretty far behind on some of the readings and other things I want to be doing. The short stories I did read this week before I get into the novels I finished, just real quick, was The Dunwich Horror by H.P. Lovecraft, as well as The Whisper in Darkness. I enjoyed both of these. I think maybe the creepiest one I've still read is The Color Out of Space by Lovecraft, but Dunwich Horror, um, it's pretty interesting. And then The Whisper in Darkness plot wise is kind of maybe not the best thing near the end. It just kind of gets convoluted, I think. But overall, I enjoyed them. They're very good cosmic tales. And I enjoy the Dunwich Horror more at the beginning. I think the prologue works really well, and then it's just not as good maybe later. But it is good still. And then I also read Teddington Lock by Lav Kedar, which I don't even remember what the name of that collection's from. But I read a story from that collection last week as well. So I think it's a 2023 story, unless it was published previously and I just wasn't aware. It Reports from the Deep End, I think is what it is. And so the other story I read in that this week was The Mississippi Variant by Michael Moorcock. I wanted to read it because it's not out yet, and I was like, "Ooh, I get to read another Moorcock story early," because I read one in New Age issue 1. And this was a Jerry Cornelius story, and maybe it'd make more sense if I'd read Jerry Cornelius, but I haven't yet. I have the final program on my shelf. I can see it because I know what the yellow spine is. But yeah, so the final program, I even have the UK version because I know the original US version was edited, essentially. And so I'm looking forward to understanding what the heck I read, but I don't really understand what I read. So it was pretty interesting from what I could gather, though. And then I also read, let's see, The Enormous Bedroom by Fritz Leiber. This is actually a story that was published in either 2001 or 2002. So I believe the last of his stuff that's been published posthumously, which hasn't been much anyways. I'd be curious when it was written. I'm pretty curious on that. I wonder if it's like earlier or later. Later, it's more horror, and he wrote a lot of his horror early on in his career, but he wrote more later in his career, but pretty late as well. It's rather sexual, but Leiber is always sexual, but it's like sexual to the point of essentially this man's torture in hell is that every time he approaches a woman in hell is that he passes out and he doesn't get to touch her or sleep with her or whatever, essentially. What I was like, that is the guy seemed like a jerk, just to put it bluntly, but I was like, that's an interesting form of torture. So it's a little risque. But the story itself, but again, like I said, Leiber is kind of open about sexual content in his stories. I feel like compared to a lot of other writers, which is weird because he's never like super explicit. Maybe in his later Fafhrd and Grey Mouse or stuff, he is a little bit, but yeah. And then I read Poor Superman, or also called Appointment in Tomorrow by Fritz Leiber. This is in this collection, and the best Fritz Leiber here. In between Coming Attraction and A Pale of Air, it is in the same world as Coming Attraction, which is also in the same world as The Green Millennium, which is a novel I reviewed earlier this year and I really enjoyed. And Poor Superman's interesting. I don't know. It's just kind of mixing science and like spiritualism, which you kind of see something like William Gibson do a little bit. And maybe I wonder if Gibson is getting maybe some of his inspiration from writers like Leiber, since I know Gibson did enjoy Leiber. And speaking of Gibson, though, I did finish Count Zero, which is book 2 in the Sprawl trilogy, or the Neuromancer trilogy, as this version of the book titles it. I didn't enjoy this one as much as Neuromancer. In a lot of ways, it's better. But I think one of the things I found awesome about Neuromancer is just like, it's just a piece of art, if that makes sense. Like, it is cyberpunk, right? And so like reading there, like, wow, type of thing. So, but that one has like, well, basically they start working for the man, right? In that novel, it doesn't really happen so much in this novel, I feel like, or at least when it does, it's I don't know, maybe utilize it better. So I am looking forward to reading Mona Lisa Overdrive. I want to read more of Gibson's short fiction because I've only read The Gernsback Continuum by him, and I really enjoyed that. That was in that big book of cyberpunk that we discussed. That's the first story we discussed, actually. So, but that Count Zero is the last book I finished this week. I finished that today. Before that, the last book I finished was The City of Marble and Blood by Howard Andrew Jones, which is sword and sorcery, kind of episodic. The review should come out Monday. I'd like to have the new Sword and Sorcery review come out with that, but we'll see. And yeah, it was very fun. I didn't enjoy it quite as much as book one, but it's very, in a lot of ways, very different from book one, but very similar at the same time. I really enjoyed it. Just to put it, bluntly, I did really enjoy it. Howard Andrew Jones is worthy of your time, and he's written quite a bit. So there's probably, I mean, not like a ton, but there's probably something for fantasy enthusiasts out there that you would like. Um, and that just came out physically Tuesday, I believe, but it came out digitally, which I was reading digitally a couple weeks ago, beginning of this month, I believe. So, and then the second book I finished this week, since we're going backwards, was "The Star Is My Destination" by, is it Alfred Bester? I'm gonna look that up. It's Bester. I know that. So, yeah, Alfred Bester. So this is another author that Gibson cites normally when he's talking about influences on him. I know he cited Delaney as well, but like from his famous introduction, that's like in every one of his books, he cites Leiber and Bester. In this book, yeah, I could definitely see the influence on cyberpunk as a genre. I didn't super enjoy it, but it's pretty short, so it didn't take up too much of my time. But it's definitely a classic from the 50s. It's funny that in that introduction to that novel, they say that like Bester is one of those writers that was liked by traditionalists, liked by New Age authors, and liked by like cyberpunks. And I was like, I feel like Leiber probably was too. Leiber was writing like in the 40s, so that's traditional time period, at least. And then he was definitely a lot of ways new wavy, right? He talks about sex and drugs, of course. And then he is obviously an influence on cyberpunk because um, Molly Millions essentially is very similar to a character from Coming Attraction. Um, like very similar in a lot of ways. It's not the same character, but like it's there. So, and you can't deny it once you've read Coming Attraction and read, Neuromancer or something like that. Anyways, the first book I finished this week, though, which is maybe my favorite read this week, it's either this or The City of Marble and Blood, and it's Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson. And I was maybe about halfway through this last week. I can't remember, but I really enjoyed it. It's not a favorite. I thought at the beginning it might turn out to be a favorite because the first couple chapters are really good. But it kind of slows down. The plot's not the best ever, but it's very much a feeling thing. And even though it's a parody or a satire of cyberpunk, it still gets a lot of messages through, which is important, of a parody or a satire. In general, I'd say, you know what I mean? But, I thought maybe it'd be missing that, and it doesn't miss it. Snow Crash was awesome. I look forward to reading that one again at some point. But yeah, it's either between that and The City of Marble and Blood. I enjoyed both of those a lot. So, and I'm looking forward to reading more by Stevenson. I have a couple books in mind. One I'm forgetting the name of. Another one, 70s, I believe, by Neil Stevenson. I have a copy of it back there because Dave Butler was talking about it and like how he enjoyed that book a lot. And then I saw it at a bookstore like the next day, so I bought it. Excuse me. So yeah. Anyways, that's essentially what my week. I want to keep this one a little shorter. Anyways, I did go through my latest short story I've written recently. And so I did. Hopefully, I'll send that out soon. I did give it to Tim. I don't know if he's read it at all. If anyone else wants to read it, Cyberpunk. It's like 5,000 words or so. And yeah, we'll see how that goes. I'll figure out Day of Might stuff if I do anything besides this a short video, which I'm going to record here in a second, actually. And then Oh yeah, I did get a story accepted for publication. Maybe I should have opened with that, but I haven't really announced it so much. I'll probably make a video on it when it comes out. Um, I'm looking forward to y'all reading it and seeing what you think. I don't, I've gotten some feedback on some of my previously published stories, but not like an insane amount. So I always really like it when I get feedback on stories I have published and stories I don't have published for that matter. It's just nicer when those stories I don't have published eventually do get published. Anyways, yeah, that story will be coming out in Whetstone issue 8. Finally, I think this is the 4th time I submitted to Whetstone, which means it's been about 2 years, and it has been about 2 years right around this time that I submitted my first story to Whetstone. And yeah, so finally got one accepted. I did have a piece accepted by Whetstone for their flash fiction, Flashes of Wonder, in April. So that is on their website. You can go read it. It's Amidst the Sleeping Castle. It's tiny. It's like 400 words. I got some feedback on that I really liked. but again, I didn't get any money from that. But it's published. Technically, I signed a contract for it even. So, um, anyways, yeah, it's been a good week, I guess. Even though the job stuff is not exactly how I wanted it to be, maybe I'll get a respite. My problem is I might not have a job by January, right? Even though I have this temporary job. Um, I'm just worried about that, I guess. And then, or some temporary jobs rather. I'm still looking. I'd like to be able to work with stuff I like, I mean, this stuff that I talk about on this channel, you know what I mean? And like, I look at my brother who, he's had a degree longer than I have by like, I don't know, year and a half, maybe. Um, and he doesn't do jobs essentially that relate to anything he studied in school, right? And I was like, I don't want that to be me. I'm trying to build up a portfolio, so to speak, by doing this. And this channel has gotten me a lot. So I really appreciate all you, or it's gotten me what I would call a lot. It's stepping stones. So, and hopefully it'll give me more, or just my studies will give me more eventually, or whatever. So, um, thank you, everyone. I will end this now because it's going too long. But thanks for watching, everyone. What have you all been up to this week? Any day of mind plans?